I did also send several, before you think that I've just narrowed down one candidate, I spoke to somebody at Donna Susi's office extensively several times to try and get Ms. Susi here to speak with us as well. She is the current Senate District 18 representative for Litchfield and Manchester. And she never got back to me about whether or not she'd be here, so I didn't know until I got here that she wasn't going to be here. But we are lucky enough to have Victoria Sullivan here with us today. Welcome, Victoria.
Thank you. I've actually been here before.
You have?
Yep. So I did a show with Ralph Boehm. He has a TV show there still, I believe.
Yeah.
And we came on to talk about charter schools at the time. Founders Academy in Manchester was a new school, and we were here discussing that. He and I served in the House Education Committee together for 4 years. So I came on, and we discussed education.
Very nice. So, what do you love about Litchfield?
Oh my gosh. So I grew up in a really small town in Massachusetts called Medway. And when I listen to the conversations that are happening about growth and expansion, it just brings me back to where I was. My town was the same population when I lived there as Litchfield is now. And now it's grown quite a bit more. In fact, I went back one time for an event, like a family thing. And I was very busy. I was on the phone. I was talking to my mom, and I told my friend, like, you gotta stop. I have to get a card. Just stop. So she's like, all right, we'll go to CVS. I wasn't even thinking about it. I was talking to my mom. So we pull in a parking lot. I get off the phone. I get out of her car, and I go, how is there a CVS in Cassidy's Field? Like this last time I was there was a farm, and so when I drive through Litchfield, I see a lot of, we've got the new housing where the horse stables used to be, and I see a lot of the changes that are happening and some of the growth that you're going through that you have to be so mindful of and careful with how you grow your town. And so I'm very sensitive to what you guys are going through here, but also when I was here for the state rep candidate forum, and I was listening to everyone talk, and Ray's like, you can just come on my front porch. Like, that is such a small town. I loved living in a small town. It was generational. Everyone knew everybody. So when I come back I actually have cousins that live in Litchfield. Okay. That I didn't know until recently, and a lot of the families that
spent quite a bit of time.
I've spent a lot of time here, and I've known that they don't always like me knocking on their door. I learned, but I've been at the recycling station many Saturdays. I've been to McQuestion Farm several times. I got a ride in the tractor from Ray, and I learned about the farm and how long it's been an essential part of this town. And I've spent a lot of time talking to voters. I'm very accessible. I'm active on social media. My phone number is out there if you need it. It's 603-232-4382. I'm accessible by email, Victoria at victoriasullivan4nh.com, the number 4. But I respond to people all the time. Like I said, I'm very accessible on social media. You can ask me anything and I will respond there. I love to engage.
You did find out, though, that Litchfield does not like the one-on-one approach at their front porch.
Which is funny because I've had great conversations on people's front porches. So maybe that's just, you as a town are so hospitable that you don't want to tell me that you don't want me there. I did get warned a couple of weeks ago about the pigs. Like, if you come down my street, be careful because pigs are loose. And I said that was the first time I had that warning knocking on doors.
Yeah,
Manchester's very different.
Control a little bit more lately, which is
great.
Really nice.
It's great, but also it's different for me because it's almost like I'm running 2 different campaigns.
Yeah, you mentioned
right?
That in Manchester they get mad if they don't see you.
Manchester, they get very angry if you don't personally. I've hit probably 4,000 doors in Manchester by myself, and they get angry if you're not the person that shows up, because obviously I have to have some people help me. I can't possibly hit all the doors myself. And if I'm not the person at the door, I'll get the call like, hey, they really want you to stop by. But grassroots in Manchester means you're knocking on doors and you're seeking out your constituents every single day.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I've been walking every day.
I'd really like to hear back on the WhatsApp page how you feel about that. It's kind of interesting that we're not, although welcoming in some cases.
Yeah, and I took heed. I now just leave you lit. I try not to bother you. I just leave it on your door. So at least you have some information about me. You can get a hold of me because I think that's important.
But you're
for
actually
us.
the one leaving the little hanging, and that's kind of cool too.
Me and Kim Rice went out last week. She drove. I ran.
Kim Rice, she's the representative that's running with or against Ralph Boehm for
So you can vote for both of them.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's our
Hudson Litchfield.
Hudson Litchfield representative.
Yeah.
Ralph had been a Litchfield rep for a really long time. For some reason, he's jumped the fence to fill in on that.
Yeah. So this is interesting. If I can just fill people in for a second here. So in Manchester, we've got a representative body in the state. The House of Representatives of 400 people. So you are going to be able to vote for more than one. So you can vote for Ralph and Kim. Right. You can vote for Ray, and you can vote for Rich, and like that's what you want to make sure you don't leave those blank. It'll say vote only two, vote your two.
Yeah.
Right. So people get.
You're gonna get two.
Yeah, because I've done a lot of recounts where you see the paper ballot and you see how people voted, and you'll see they'll fill in one and not the other one because they just don't understand. So because it's odd, right? You usually have one choice in each category. So just so people know, you can vote for two.
Thank you.
Not in the Senate district. Only vote for me.
So what are you doing right now? What made you decide that you wanted to run against Donna?
So I was in the State House for 4 years. I sat in the House Education Committee. I got a lot of great work done there that expanded parental voice in education. I've watched parental voice and rights be attacked in the legislature for the last couple of years, and through local school policy. And Manchester has a very rigid school policy that does not allow for parental voice. And I watched a parental bill of rights go in that was voted against. Donna voted against it. I've seen an attack on girls' sports spaces and opportunities, and by having biological males go in and compete. This is something that has really become, New Hampshire has become ground zero in this fight. We've seen the folks in Bow that stood up and wanted to protect their kids. Now, I want to just make sure we understand that when we're fighting this, we're fighting the policies, not the children that are involved in this, because there's always a child in the middle of this, right?
And that's the hard part,
is
the sensitivity to the family,
right,
to the child.
And we're fighting the policies that put that child in that position in the first place, and the policies that having girls choose not to play their own sport because they don't want to get hurt because they're competing against a biological male. And we've seen the injuries across the state, right? So Donna voted against protecting girls in their sports spaces and opportunities. So, she's currently my senator, and I do not feel represented by her. There was a bill that was in that would have protected New Hampshire from forming sanctuary cities. We see what's happening in Massachusetts, billions of dollars being spent to house people that chose to violate our laws to be here. We have a big immigrant and refugee community in Manchester. These people are really upset that they are doing all the things that they need to do to get legal citizenship, and people are jumping the fence and getting ahead of them and giving them money while simultaneously, my mom lives in elderly housing. We're not helping our elderly or helping them out financially in many ways that they need. So I'm just watching the disparities at the state level and watching these DC values come in and sort of hit us when those aren't New Hampshire values at all. Like, we want to protect our girls. We want to protect all of our children, right? We want to protect our communities. We are not a big wealthy state. We are working class folks, and every tax dollar counts. And we want to make sure it goes to the people that are feeding into the system. So I'm basically running because I didn't feel represented by my state senator, and I knew that I could go in there and represent the people.
Okay. Wow. Okay. Now I'm confused. I don't know where to go next.
I'm sorry.
That's okay. No, that was really good. That was a great answer. I like to have to think on my feet because that's why we have you here, so that you can show us your passion for what you're doing, because there has to be a passion.
I do. So sometimes it's misinterpreted as anger, but it's not. It's like I'm very passionate. I chose, like I said, I grew up in Massachusetts. I chose to live here because I loved this state. Massachusetts has changed a lot since I grew up there. Yeah. My folks moved here in 1990, and I wanted to be close to them, raising our kids. Right. And I can't imagine any better state to raise them in. There's no place else I'd want to live. So
how do we increase the revenue in the state, though? How do you feel about like we already have gambling in the state, and it's kind of masked by that it's charitable donations or whatever. It's gambling just like it is anywhere else.
Right, of course it is.
Yeah, it is.
It's a lot of people making money.
Are we getting the bang for our buck from that sin that's already here and already being collected on by other people? Are we getting our bite at that apple.
And they justify it by giving a percentage of it to charity, right? But we're also seeing that, they want to expand that, and we'd get more revenues that would, Massachusetts people might not go to Connecticut or Rhode Island. They might come up here to use our casinos. There's one very close to my house. I'll say it's not increased any crime or anything in where I live, but
They're packed all the time.
they are very busy. A lot of out of state people are coming here to spend their money there.
Yeah.
So I went a couple of times for charities that I believed in, and went and played bingo, and it was fun. I'm very bad at it. I'm bad at bingo, apparently. I don't win.
These aren't like bingo halls like they were when we were raising money for hockey or baseball equipment or things like that. I mean, these are like, there's
Yep, they've expanded.
blackjack
Yep.
and roulette and craps and machines, and I mean, they are casinos.
They are.
So we're kind of let them in under like a little veil, but not really getting all the revenue from them that we should be.
Right. Well, and
Are there changes that can be made to that?
I'm sure that that's discussed all the time. There's a gaming commission, and they're always looking at how to, on the state level, and they're always looking at how to best benefit the state. I mean, but because they're privately owned, right? They're not state owned. So you have to have negotiations with the property owners and the business owners that take a lot of the risk, that still want to make sure they have a profit on the other side. So there's always that balance that happens.
What about cannabis?
Oh, gosh. So I am a liberty-minded person. And I believe that if you want to grow it in your yard and you want to smoke it, make tincture, whatever you want to do, that is none of my business. I don't think it's anyone's business. I don't think that there should be legal ramifications for that. I believe in decrim because I work a lot. So I'll just give you a little bit of background about me. I run a sober home in Manchester that is a faith-based sober home for men. And I am the director of a nonprofit staffing agency, and I work with the most vulnerable people in our society. They are homeless. We literally pick people up at the shelters. They are in recovery. They have been incarcerated, or they're currently in a work release program. And I really work with our most vulnerable populations. So when people are asking me about cannabis, I know it's a gateway for some people. It's not for everybody. But on the other side of that, I also know that medically, it's helped a lot of people. I know people, a gentleman that was on medication, like very toxic medications for schizophrenia, a tincture of cannabis helps him more than that, and he has a very successful, steady life, right? So I don't think there's a blanket, like, let's just make it legal, and I don't like the taxation conversation, because that's not.
But it is, our tax dollars are going to Massachusetts and going to Maine and going to all the states that surround us where it's legal.
Right.
I mean, so we are not providing something that they can't get 5 minutes from their house, almost from any border.
And when you look at some of the studies, though, about states that have legalized it and they use the tax dollars, it's a wash. Your crime increases, what you have to put in for money into THS and helping people with addiction because of it is higher, and there's more money that's put into public servants like your police, and I mean, right now, this is where it's night and day for us too. And
So it's kind of a not in my backyard thing, because I have noticed, like in Massachusetts,
it's expensive to have it.
It's not in like the kind of hoity-toity neighborhoods
Right.
in Massachusetts.
Right.
It's more the.
It's not like you have a product that doesn't have consequences, I guess is what I'm saying. So if you want to make revenue off of it, but does that revenue actually, at the end of the day, when you look at what it costs to have it in your state, is it a wash, or actually are you making money? And, like I said, I co-sponsored a bill that increased the use of medical marijuana for our veterans, right? There are uses for marijuana that
PTSD
absolutely
is one of the.
change people's
Yeah.
lives.
Yep.
Absolutely.
Yep.
And, there's,
Cancer victims, things
yeah,
like
and there's
that.
also a conversation about if so the state would run it, that's the problem, right? But if the state runs it, you're not gonna have it laced, but there's always gonna be a black market too. because it's always going to be cheaper on the black market, right? So you're not actually going to make it safer in a lot of cases. Like right now, you can get fentanyl, you can get heroin. There's always a black market for drugs. So the argument that if the state sells marijuana, it's all going to be above board and safer, it just isn't. There's always a black market. So like I am, you can probably tell, I'm conflicted on this.
I think we're all a little conflicted on it, and I know that there's still the driving aspect of it too.
There's no way to,
It's harder, but I mean, it's not like in New Hampshire, we're not having like this huge accident, like explosion in our state now anyhow, and I don't think that it's necessarily, I think it's more distracted driving. With phones
and people are just not, something happened with COVID that broke our society, and I really believe that we've got some healing to do, and we need to start thinking about our fellow man again. I see the mental health crisis in our kids from being so isolated for so long.
It's still there. I see it myself, and it's like, wow.
Yeah, and in adults, I see it in adults that can't properly interact with people anymore. But and I really think like we did start to see sort of an increase during COVID because people were just, there's so much anxiety, and I think that going forward we've lost track of like, okay, I need to get someplace, but my time isn't more important than your life, right? Mm-hmm. I know a lot of it is distracted driving because you see it. You see people on the phones when they're actually driving. I've seen on the highway going 75 miles an hour, right? It can wait. Like, put it down. It can. There's nothing. We grew up in a day. Now I'm going to be on a rant. But we grew up in a time where you had to get home to find out who called you. Right. And you missed phone calls, and guess what? Life went on. Right? And now we live in a society where if someone texts you and you don't get back in 5 minutes, they're like, hey, where are you? What's going on? My mother, if I don't get back to her straight away, she's like, oh my God, what happened? Are you okay? I'm like, yeah, I was just in a meeting. But we're used to this instant reaction to each other. And but I'll say I do the same thing. If I don't hear from her in a period of time, I'm like, have you heard from Mom? Where is she? Is she okay? But we get used to this constant contact with each other, and we didn't have cars in the phone. I mean, scratch that, reverse it, phones in the car. And we were okay. Yeah. You know what I mean? And I think that what did they say about me on Facebook? Oh, I've got to get back to this person. I've got to do that. We are just so caught up in ourselves that we're not looking at, okay, that can wait. And what's happening in front of me right now is really important because there's a child in that car in front of me. Or, and that's when I was teaching my boys how to drive, that's what I always taught them. There's other people in the cars in front of you. So if you're not leaving enough space, someone rear-ends you, you're now in that car and you're endangering them. And we have to think about the other people around us when we're
politics
living.
Is like that too, because we have to be looking at the whole picture.
Whole picture, yeah.
And not just our own little place in it, but how we're affecting the world that we're going to live.
100%.
And I'm curious myself whether or not you've taken the no tax oath.
I did.
You did? Yeah.
Yep.
So no, you're not for income tax or?
No. So we have, with a Republican majority and in the House and the Senate and a Republican governor, we have done a great job raising revenues while we also decrease tax burdens. We were able to send taxpayer dollars back to the cities and towns that should have provided a tax relief for them, lessen their tax burden. The towns, like I'll say Manchester, reused the money instead of getting it back to the property tax owners. But when Governor Sununu and our legislature reduced the room and meals tax, for example, people said, oh no, they reduced the tax, we're in trouble, we're going to be losing revenue. We increased revenue. And he's done that with us reducing the business taxes. They've increased revenue. It's the businesses are doing better. They're healthier. More businesses want to come here because of it. And so we're increasing revenue by being more responsible on the tax side of things. So, we're not, when I say we're, not a rich state, I mean individually, we are working class folks. Mm-hmm. But the way that our money has been managed by the Republicans in the legislature has been fiscally sound, and we have money to fall back on, and we can afford the things that we need to do.
And yet towns like us are still desperately looking for help for the schools.
And that comes, see, now you're going to get me in trouble because people don't want to talk about this, but you have to look at your town budget and who you have on your school boards and how they're spending money. And that's what a lot of this comes back to. You have a declining enrollment like the rest of the state, but increased school budget, and you have to look at that and say, where are we spending the money, and why isn't it getting to the kids? Because in a lot of cases, it's non-teaching staff. We're adding social workers, we're adding other staff, support staff outside, but it's not going to the kids. And that's really where it comes from. And I know there was conversation about the education freedom accounts, and they get sort of beat up in this whole thing.
Yeah, that's a point that comes up on the WhatsApp
Yeah.
page quite frequently, is that we're hurting
Yeah.
our local education by allowing that. Can you speak on that?
I can, and it's so hard because it's such a convoluted way that we actually fund our schools from the state level. It's very confusing for people. So I will say there was an article that was put out saying that 70% of the kids receiving EFAs were already in private schools, and so therefore they were just rich kids getting these funds. And I've had this conversation with people when I knocked on their doors, and they believed it. It's partially true. So, and I'm sorry to take up so much time on this, but I think this is a conversation I see happening in Litchfield a lot, is about your education funding. There was a children's scholarship fund that was set up. It's tax deferred private dollars that are put into a fund through the children's scholarship, in the children's scholarship fund through an organization. And that money would be divvied up to people that applied for it, families that applied for it, that were under 300% of the federal income poverty guidelines or less, right? Or less. So they would get that money. That was about $3,000 per child, which doesn't fund private school completely. So they would have to rely on funds, either be able to pay some of those funds themselves or rely on the schools to also give them private funds to help them stay in school. Then the education freedom accounts came in, different funding system, different fund of money. That you had to be under the 350% of the federal poverty guidelines to qualify for that. So now, if you're under 300%, you're certainly under 350%. So now you qualify for both.
Oh, okay.
All right? So when they say 70% of the kids, yes, but there were poor kids that were receiving scholarships from private funds that happened to qualify for this as well. Not rich kids. Rich kids aren't living in 350% of the poverty guidelines or less, right? So I just wanted to qualify that because it's a really huge misconception. And then what happens with that, the EFA money, is you get a certain pocket of money that follows a child. Say it's probably close to $4,000 now. I haven't been in the legislature for a bit, so I'm not 100% sure. And that's $4,000 if you are on the lowest part of that 350% of the federal poverty guidelines. So you're in the lower end of earners, right? So if you're on the higher end of that, you get less money. So it could be $1,500 or it could be up to $4,000 depending on your family's income, okay? So that is the state money that would follow the child to the Litchfield school if they attended here. But now that they're not attending here, that money is going to go to the school that they've chosen to go to, okay? Yes. But your local property tax money is still there. That doesn't follow the child. That is still there for you to use, should you choose to use it, but the EFAs have saved local property taxes millions of dollars because you're no longer educating that child. Only 3% of the entire student body in the state uses education freedom accounts. But the ones that do alleviate some of the, like in Manchester, alleviate some of the class size burden and alleviate some of the financial burden because they're no longer in that school system.
I thought it was interesting what Rich said too about that really the intent of this was to compete with schools that were failing and to challenge them to meet the needs of.
So competition is always that, but if you look at cities again like Manchester, where we've got kids like our refugee families that are put into the lowest socioeconomic neighborhoods in the city, they have the lowest performing schools. And so if you put all of these kids in one area and you segregate them by zip code, you're going to have kids that really could have thrived somewhere else, that they're just lost in the system, right? I've seen it. I actually drove a child who was living in a poorer part of Manchester. He got a scholarship to go to a private school with my son, and I gave him a ride to school every day. He was here from the Congo. He was a refugee. Brilliant young man, and well-spoken, confident, and he did so well at this school, and I think he just would have not had the ability to thrive if he had been put into a neighborhood school.
I think sometimes we forget why that education freedom, because it really isn't, I mean, our demographic in Litchfield is very different from that
Very
in
different.
Manchester.
Very different.
And that leads me to, as a senator, we would share, and we've never seen Donna Susie here in Litchfield. I mean, she's never knocked on doors. She's never come to a an event here that I know of. I've never seen her. Are there things that you could focus on for Litchfield that would make it worth our vote to get you in there instead of Donna?
Yeah, like I said, I'm very accessible. I'm watching your conversations already on the What's Up pages, which is,
I thought that
I know
was
there's two, so I get confused a little bit, but, yeah, so I am engaging voters already to see what's important to them. I thought it was great when they said that the legislators should come to your city meetings, because I think it's important to have that conversation with the leaders on the state and the local level.
And you'd be willing to do that?
100%.
This is where the selection.
Yeah, and even, I haven't been in office for a while, and I still help anyone that reaches out to me. Some of these education freedom accounts are used for kids that are horribly bullied in their schools. And I've had parents reach out to me and just say, I don't know how to navigate this. And I've sat down and helped them fill out the forms and do the process to get them in there. And I'm happy to do that for any family that's struggling. If you've got a child that needs more services and you don't know how to do it, I don't always know how to do it, but I know how to connect you to the person that can help you get it. So, even not in office, I'm a public servant. I'm there for people,
Yeah.
and I really want, my whole life is my commitment to my community. When my kids were little, I was PTA president in their school. I was on the PTA executive board. I ran book drives across the city, even during COVID, when the schools and the libraries were closed. I was doing book drives. They'd show up where they were giving away food. I'd be there with a table with my kids, and we were giving out books to kids, so everybody had access to reading materials. Like I said, right now, I'm
So you're kind of sleeves rolled up type of public.
every day.
Yeah.
Everything is about your community. Everything. And, if you guys have things here, I'm happy to be
We're
here.
going to come knock on your door, and we're going to say we want to see you in Litchfield.
Now, listen, I don't think it's fair that you can knock on my door, but I can't knock on yours.
All right.
I'm only
That's
kidding.
true.
I'm only
That's
kidding.
true.
My door is open anytime.
I appreciate you coming to visit us today, and I know you have a lot on your calendar. We're coming closer and closer to the election.
We are having a Republican Women's Day of Action today, so I'll be heading back out to hit doors. But like I said, if you want to get a hold of me, my phone number is 603-232-4382. That is my home number. You can reach me. I'm on social media, on Facebook and on Twitter. And, just reach out to me anytime. I'm very happy to have the conversation, especially if we don't agree, because I find that there's usually some kind of common ground and something that's important to both of us that we can work on together.
I appreciate that. Thank you very much.
Thank you for
being
having
here.
me.
Thank you very much to Litchfield Community Television, John Brunell, for being our cameraman today. And thank you to Jason Brennan for being behind the scenes, making sure there was no questions on the What's Up page for you. I don't think we've had any. And I think we'll probably see each other again in some asset of community service.
I think that's awesome. Thank you for having me.
Okay, thank you so much. Bye, Litchfield. Take good care of yourselves. Don't forget to use your local services that we have here in town. Go to your local businesses. I think there's a craft fair. Is that today? There's a craft fair at Chick Farm Craft. It was really fun when I went there, the last one. I think I did a live broadcast from there. Support Mike, support your local businesses. It's all we can do to keep ourselves going. Thanks very much, Litchfield. And